Hello there and welcome to Plus Talk on Plus Life, where we get right to it. We are about turning positive into a plus. Today I'm joined by a very special guest from the ski slopes of France. You may have heard the name James Bushe in the press recently. He is the first person to newly obtain a commercial pilot's license, which means he can fly commercial aeroplanes, and he's living with HIV. Why is this a big deal? Well, James is joining me now and he can tell us for himself. James, thanks so much for joining me on Plus Talk.
You're very, very welcome.
Sorry to drag you off the ski slopes. We won't keep you long so you can hit your après ski. But what an interesting 2 weeks this has been for you. For people who haven't seen the headlines, tell us a bit about your story.
Yeah, sure. So it's been an absolute whirlwind. So 2 years ago, when I went for my medical from a commercial pilot, I was denied that medical purely on the basis that I am HIV positive. And the rules at the time stated that if you were already a commercial pilot that had a license who subsequently developed HIV, you could continue to fly. However, if you were someone who was HIV positive but wanted to become an airline pilot, you couldn't.
So what's the reasoning? Why couldn't you?
So the rules, as they still stand actually, require you to have something that's called a multi-crew limitation, on the basis that if you are HIV positive, there is a risk that you may become incapacitated during flights. We'll get there. And because of that, the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK and in Europe said, if you're a pilot, yeah, sure, we'll let you fly. However, you must always fly as part of a multi-crew. However, if you didn't already hold a license, they were not willing to give you that medical with that multi-crew limitation. So it all came down to this multi-crew limitation, where they said, actually, multi-crew limitations are only applicable to people that are already flying airplanes. And that limitation was designed to keep people flying, not introduce, as was said to me by some authorities, a risk group into the industry. So for that reason,
a risk group.
So for that reason, I was denied the medical. And what they said was, and essentially, the risk of incapacitation, and sort of fear of getting too detailed here, all came down to neurocognitive impairment. So literally the feeling was that potentially your ability to sort of go, up, down, left and right might be hindered because of your HIV status and because of the treatment and the side effects. And this all came down to studies that were done in the late 90s and early 2000s. So obviously, as you and I both know, that's not applicable in 2020. Someone on successful treatments with an undetectable viral load can't pass the virus on, and ultimately you're not going to show any signs or symptoms of HIV. So that was what I wanted to challenge.
So it came down to the discrimination. Can you just tell me a little bit more about what it means by sort of the multi-crew thing? Because I don't think there are many commercial airline pilots out there who are flying by themselves anyway, right?
No. So essentially, and that was my argument in the beginning, really, because they weren't willing to give this multi-crew limitation on someone who wasn't already a pilot. Again, purely on this basis of not introducing higher risk groups of people, be it with HIV or another condition, into the industry. So my argument to the UK authorities and the European regulators was that actually there's no reason why we can't give this multi-crew limitation to someone who wants to enter the industry, like myself, and fly for an airline who will always have two pilots and maybe more. So, I didn't see the issue or the barrier of giving me this medical with that multi-crew limitation. And that was the argument we made, essentially.
Right, and this started a while ago, and I know that in sort of the build-up, you were using a pseudonym, you weren't using your real name. So when did the moment come where you decided that you were going to tell the world who you were, and why?
It came for me once I had qualified and I'd gotten an airline job. And I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to continue the story from, the days of Pilot Anthony and say, hey, this is Pilot Anthony is now qualified. He's living with HIV and he's got a job, and, sort of you can do it too. But I thought if I was to do this under the alias of Pilot Anthony, it would just perpetuate the stigma that surrounds people that live with HIV, including ourselves. And I thought, No. The only way that I can do this is if I do it as me, because whilst everyone goes on a journey with HIV, and I certainly have been on one myself, there is no shame in living with HIV. It is just another chronic condition. So I wanted to tell the story as me to, one, say to people, look, if you are living with HIV and you want to become a pilot, you now can. Secondly, if you are facing discrimination in any other walk of life because of your status, challenge it and you can win. And thirdly, there is no shame in being HIV positive. And, the only way that we break the stigma down and break those barriers down is to talk about it openly. It shouldn't be something that's kind of sweeps under the carpet and a taboo subject. And I think more people that should come out,
Yeah, and so what has the reaction been like? I know you got a job with Loganair based out of Scotland. So how did you have that conversation with them?
I'd already got the job before I told them. And I think part of the reason why I hadn't disclosed my status to anyone in the industry before was potentially a fear of, not getting a job, really. However, I have to say, from the moment of me telling my boss and eventually the CEO, they were incredibly supportive. And, their view, as it should be, has been that before they employed me, they had 270 qualified pilots who were capable of doing the job. Now they've got 271. And status should play no bearing in that process whatsoever.
So what was that moment like when you flew that first flight?
It was incredible. I have been obsessed with airplanes and flying since I was a wee boy. And I took my first flying lesson at 15, and it's taken me another 15 or so years to get there. But yeah, it was almost indescribable. Just the feeling of just knowing that you've kind of, you're in control of this massive aircraft and responsible for all these people. And, it's been a long process. So it was overwhelming to try, to finally realize that one for sure.
It's funny you say there's sort of this relief and the sense of all of that. For you personally, what has the feeling been like to finally be able to sort of have this out there in the open? Everybody knows now. What has it done internally for you?
Yeah, do you know what? I hadn't quite comprehended until I'd done this how much of a burden had sort of been lifted. Because it's every time I felt previously that, every time you sit down and have the conversation, it's almost like, talking about your sexuality again and coming out over again and again. And now I sort of feel like, I don't have to. I still want to answer questions, I'll still answer any questions that people have. And it's an opportunity to hopefully change people's perceptions, and say to people that actually, this could happen to anyone, and it does. But actually, it doesn't make any difference. So I think for me, it's been, I'd underestimated how much of an impact it would have had on me. And it just feels now that it was the last part of a journey of personal acceptance, really. And I can kind of go on and live life now,
Yeah, and I can totally relate to that. I've said the same kind of thing, I also didn't realize, for me personally, the level of internalized stigma that I had put on myself in sort of a way that I would make jokes all the time. Oh, you don't want me, I'm damaged goods and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Until I came out. Have you had any sort of similar kind of things like that?
Again, yeah, for sure. And I didn't realize how much of that I'd put on myself. And, the phrase self-stigma is bandied around a lot. And I think it's one that's really difficult to define. But yeah, certainly, I would almost, prior to this, make assumptions about, people and say, actually, you know what, there's no point in carrying on this conversation because, when we get to this point of me telling them that I'm HIV positive, they're not going to want to see me again. And sometimes that was based on real experience and it was founded, but sometimes it wasn't. And the difficulty for me prior to this was always knowing when to have that conversation, And I've tried it at different parts of the process, first of all, be it when you first start somebody online and you think, oh, I'll just say it now. And then, you hear nothing. You wait to a first or a second date. There's so many sort of, there's trial and error that has been applied to it, and there's no right or wrong answer. But yeah, that in itself was huge. I did think, at one point in time, actually, somebody might not want me because of this. The reality is, over the last 2 weeks, it's been proven to be not the case at all, which is...
Look at you, Stud Muffin, getting people sliding into your DMs.
Most were welcome, but maybe not all.
Well, no, and it's, you are saying everything that I have said that I think anyone living with HIV around the world has felt, that we've all gone through this, almost damned if you did and damned if you didn't. There was never a right time and it was never easier. And similar to what you said, it was kind of like having to come out every single time. So with all of this, and I know it's been 2 weeks and obviously a whirlwind and a lot of attention, how do you think this is going to change you for sort of moving forward in your personal life?
It's a great question. So I guess the first thing is that the biggest sort of factor in me doing this, first of all, was being comfortable myself and being comfortable with the diagnosis. But secondly, knowing that if the reaction wasn't as good as it had been, it didn't matter so much, because I've got supportive friends and family, and something that I've learned over the years has been that if someone reacts in a not so great way to you coming out to them as HIV positive, then that's their reaction. That's not a reflection on you personally. So, I kind of gone through a lot of that process before this. However, now I think it just means that there'll be no fear of being open from the very beginning, and actually there's what was maybe a handful of experiences myself over the last few years of having great reactions and maybe some cautious ones. Now, over the last 2 weeks, there have been thousands of amazing reactions, So actually, now it gives me the confidence to go into any situation in my personal life and think that it's probably going to be more likely that someone's going to react in a good way than not. And that's, that's amazing.
Tell me a bit about the people who inspired you along the way with this, and why and how.
Sure. So I think the most recent sort of influences have been in the UK, Gareth Thomas, the Welsh rugby player, who came out as HIV positive back in the summer. And he had a great response to him doing it. And I thought, you know what, if someone of that sort of stature and celebrity, for want of a better word, can get such a positive feedback, then, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do the same. And obviously, we've had examples from Jonathan Van Ness, also a local member of Parliament in the UK, Lloyd Russell Moyle. And again, these three people all had fantastic responses. And I think the important thing is for me that the more people that can come out in different walks of life to demonstrate that, this person is a doctor, a teacher, a nurse, a pilot. Oh, and by the way, they also happen to be living with HIV, the better. And, that's how we start to provoke conversations in different parts of, different walks of life, really.
Well, I am so glad that you've taken time to have this conversation with us at Plus Life. It's been fantastic meeting you via Skype. I hope to meet you in person one day and give you a big hug and shake your hand. You really have done amazing things for so many people, and I think you are seeing that through people who are reaching out to you via direct message. So I won't take any more of your time. James Bushe, thank you so much for joining us from the snowy ski slopes of France. That's going to do it for this episode of Plus Talk. Now, remember, you can follow Plus Life across all social media platforms. We are at Plus Life Media, and you can check out the website pluslifemedia.com. I'll see you next time.